What a wonderful transition to move from the kōrero that Sheena has left on stage. And I want to pick up a comment that she made about going to the awa or to the Whanganui River to look for solutions. Because that's at the core, I think, of our discussion this afternoon about how we use traditional knowledge from our ancestors, knowledge that is handed to us and left for us in a contemporary way, in a contemporary sense. But first of all, I'm going to ask you all, and we'll start with you, Chris, if we can, what is your definition of that? What does that look like for you in terms of you, your people, using traditional knowledge?
Well, thank you for that question, Shane. I think traditional knowledge is so important in all of our cultures. With that understanding, if we do not rely on the knowledge of our elders, then oftentimes moving forward is difficult. And I think at least in the United States, again, with the diversity of all the tribes, how important it is to rely on the leadership of elders, but also on the guidance for the next generation. And I think that's really important of how we often define that as 7 generations. And most communities in the United States feel that way of holding up the elders and having multiple generations to learn from.
Hoturoa?
I guess for me, the traditional knowledge of our tūpuna helps you get stuff done. You know, when gear breaks, you just talk loud, you know, because that's how we've been taught to speak when we're all together on the marae and things like. We don't rely on other stuff because that's the way you've been taught how to do these things. So I always look towards that kind of kōrero and that the information the mātauranga held in the kōrero of our ancestors to say to me, you should try and do it this way, or look for the clues around you to find a solution. So, and they're all there.
To get things done. Hinemoa, your interpretation?
Aye. So for me, mātauranga is a natural resource. We've heard from our Emirati tuakana about how oil has been the source of wealth on which they have built their incredible city and reflect their extraordinary ancient culture. For me, mātauranga is our oil. It's our puna of resourcefulness, and it provides that authentic source of economic wealth and potential that remains relatively untapped. I suppose the other thing that I reflect on is that, to me, our mātauranga has that future proofing already embedded within it. Just reflecting on the talks we've heard today and how our mātauranga is so flexible in its ability to be cross-hybridized. One small example of that, Hoturoa spoke to us earlier about waka mātauranga. When I was completing some research looking for ways to help our people with traumatic brain injury heal, I drew upon and brought forward that waka tradition of pulling up those islands as they do, rather than going and floating around and hoping they find land, which is not what happens. And I've brought that mātauranga into the journey of healing for our whānau who face brain injury, and it works really, really well. So just to illustrate how that natural resource has a wealth of potential for us.
Hayden, what about your experience in using traditional knowledge, mātauranga, Māori?
I guess balance in regards to industry in Aotearoa and probably globally. There has been very little cultural tikanga being used by industries, especially in Aotearoa. And it's time that we need to educate those who have gone before us, because there's a big mess lying in front of us, and educating industry so that we can be sustainable, and is probably one of the biggest things for me, is bringing the kōrero of our old people to the forefront, because it's fallen on deaf ears for so many generations, and the way the globe is at the moment, it's our old people's kōrero now that will help us move into the future.
Hinemoa, can you talk to us more about your application of mātauranga Māori, how you've used it or how you would like to use it perhaps in the work that you're involved in?
Sure. So as a child and adolescent psychiatrist, I do draw on our mātauranga every single day in my practice working with our whānau. And one of the key things that has been incredibly powerful has been the sense of kaitiakitanga as another source of well-being and strength and a sense of hope, of a role for our tamariki mokopuna whose lives have been so disrupted by COVID and their whānui. So using whakatauki, whakatauaki, which are simple, nuggery bits of wisdom, concentrated packages of wisdom from our tupuna, which I think are really accessible as a doorway into te ao Māori. Because let's face it, we are still colonised, it's still really hard to be Māori at home. And so I've found that those forms of rongoā, I roto i tō tātou reo, I roto i tō tātou mātauranga, are something I can prescribe, if you like, and use as a doctor to just help to normalise for many of our tamariki Māori who really don't know much about who they are. It's not their fault, but that's part of why they're unwell. And so what I see is when we use karakia, when we take the time to use whakawhanaungatanga, these things which seem so normal to many of us, but which have been hidden from, or some of our whānau have been actively excluded from experiencing those things. When I've seen with my own eyes how powerful they are. For example, in the Kōti Rangatahi, we have youth court on our marae, and our youth court judges ask our rangatahi to learn their pepeha, which I talked about yesterday, and you see before your eyes that visible transformation and reclaiming of their sense of future and their sense of being kaitiaki.
Hoturoa, let's pick up a comment that Hinemoa made about normalising the use of mātauranga Māori. I'm interested in your experience living on a waka and how you may apply that experience, that way of living, to onshore.
I think for a lot of the people who come sailing with us, especially on long trips, one of the things they have to come to grips with is the fact that we're like on a little... Our waka is like a small mobile island, if for want of a better word. And so we have to be able to get from where we start to where we end only with the stuff we've got on board. So it teaches all our team to be careful with resources that we have, to be aware of each other, because the space is so small, you have to be good to each other. Mm-hmm. And so you need to have a little community that works well together. And what you need that community to do once you've got there is that when you get off at the other end, they still want to be a community together, rather than just sort of get off and go, I'm never going to sail with that person ever again, you know, because those things can happen. Mm-hmm. I was asked one time, someone interviewed me after while I was getting a crew ready to go on a voyage, and someone from a radio station rang me up and said, you know, when you choose your crew, what kind of crew do you choose? And I said, oh, well, you know, I look for someone who's kind, I look for someone who's quite happy to take instruction, I'm wanting to see if they're a person who's got a bit of initiative, but you know, the main thing is to have a bit of empathy for the rest of their crew. And they were quite surprised, and they said to me, look, we thought you'd be wanting someone who's strong, who's fit, who can swim far and can climb up the ropes and all that stuff. And I said, you know, one of the things for me is that I can teach someone to swim, I can teach someone to climb up the mast, but it's pretty hard to teach someone to be good when they come in and they're not really in that sort of a space. And so, you know, if you get everyone understanding that this is the kind of environment that we need to be moving in, you know, the result of, in terms of whanaungatanga, in terms of looking after each other, in terms of looking after your resources, because you're not greedy. As you're sailing, as the water's going down, you're always checking, oh, have we got enough? Do you have enough water? Have we got enough kai? Do you want some of my kai? All those kind of things are the things that teach you that on land we should apply these same kinds of things and look after each other, look after our resources. Now, there's a little saying, you know, when you're sailing, your waka is your island. And then when you get there, your island is your waka. And if you can operate in that kind of space, it works.
As you were saying, have we got enough of this? Have we got enough of that? It's struck me. Those are questions we're asking ourselves right now as we go through a global pandemic, and we will come back and talk about that very subject. Chris, I want to come to you now. And when we're talking about natural resources and issues, there have been a number of issues in the States with tribes, and you do a lot of work with tribes to help support them navigate their way through these issues. What does your experience tell you? Well, what can your experience tell us about the way in which you're supporting tribes and their use of their traditional knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm part of a board called the First Peoples Worldwide. The work that the First Peoples Worldwide out of the University of Colorado does is focus on sustainability for future generations. And a lot of that work is really identifying the social loss of that happens or occurs when folks, when businesses or large corporations don't look at the rights of Indigenous people. And one example of some of the work that we've done with First Peoples Worldwide was around the Dakota Access Pipeline, where not only was the rights of the people not only were totally disregarded, no consultation, no discussion about the planning of the pipeline, but the actual amount of loss that not only the company who was planning the pipeline took huge financial loss for all the companies involved, and then the social loss of the own tribal communities. So that's one example of a project that everybody was at a loss when it happened, and it could have been prevented with proper consultation with the tribe and around with the several surrounding communities as well. So a lot of the work we've done is how do we work with our populations on understanding the rights that folks have around consultation, and then how do we work with companies for them to understand how much of a social loss this could happen if you don't follow the rights of Indigenous populations.
Hayden, you've been the chair of your tribe for many years now, and you spent a lot of time, especially during the global pandemic, in supporting your people in a time of crisis. And talk to us about how you did that, but specifically about drawing on the knowledge and the way in which you were brought up too by your ancestors.
Yeah, I think globally the pandemic has allowed us all, especially with lockdown, you know, not being able to go outside has actually allowed us all to stop and reflect and actually see what's really valuable to us in life, our whānau, the environment. We actually have the ability to watch the environment take care of itself. And, you know, our leadership that we have with our government at the moment, recently investing into jobs for nature. So we actually have whānau now employed out into the environment. We have huge impact on us around resource consenting and stuff, and we don't have those bodies within my tai whenua. So we're trying to build that capacity so that we can, you know, place them so that we're doing all the cultural stuff on developments and we're keeping an eye on what's happening. Also taking people up to Ngāi Tūhoi and learning from the best around the ngāhere, the environment. And I've been educated 5 minutes in their presence. I'm educated by them. I went up there and I said to them, they said, you know, what is it you're wanting? I said, I want you to help me write a plan for the taiao so we can manage the taiao. And they said to me, what you need is a management plan for people, not the taiao. It is people that need managing, because when we are out of the taiao, it will flourish.
Hinemoa, talking about people, I've heard you talk about the magnificence of the Māori mind. Tell us what you mean by that.
So I was very lucky to spend time with Amsteridi during some of my research and practice as a doctor. And this is something I learned from Papa Amster, which apparently was the kōrero when white people first came to Aotearoa. They were blown away by our capacity to remember, to recite whakapapa, to recite whakamoemitsi, karakia. And I'm really interested in how we reclaim those ideas and live those ideas. I'm a practical person, I'm a practitioner, I'm a pragmatist, and I have a sense of urgency. I want all of our tamariki mokopuna and rangatahi and our pakeke, because we do have that generation gap where a lot of our pakeke are a bit left behind, to experience this magnificence of the Māori mind. It's there for all of us, sort of untapped. One aspect of what I've been doing recently is I've been part of a group looking at the kaumātuatanga o ngā roro, and what our whakaaro in te ao Māori, what our mātauranga is about the ageing brain for us and our kaumātu and kuia. And we certainly see evidence, do we not, of the magnificence of the Māori mind when we think about all of our koro and our kui back home and what they bring and how revered they are, which is quite different from Pākehā culture, from non-Māori culture, white culture in Aotearoa. So we've collected a lot of information, a lot of mātauranga in a marae-based design, which really illustrates the potential. And we are still living with the colonisation of our own minds. We are restricted by that. And really, I'm interested how we can use forum like this to open up the ideas of using that magnificence of our minds in every sphere of our lives, economic development, and how that links with taking care of papa tuanuku and tangaroa.
Hoturoa, we'll talk shortly about COVID, but something just came to mind while I was listening to Hinemoa there about colonisation and what we can take from an experience living on a waka to decolonise ourselves. Can you talk to us about that and how that may be possible?
I think with life on the waka and taking that step from the shore onto the waka and then setting off is your first step to helping decolonise your thinking. Because one of the big things for people, as I said before, is that they don't have over the years, there's never been a lot of faith that this kind of stuff that we do on our waka is safe, will be successful, And that's because other people have told us how dangerous it is. Other people have told us that you need to have all these little things on your vessel to get somewhere safely. And for us to be able to have people on board, I'll give you an example. We sailed to Rarotonga a few years ago, and it was really rough. That video you saw, it was way worse than that. And the trip took us 16 days, and 12 days of it was storm like that. And about 5 days into it, we had this guy, it's the first time he's ever done an offshore trip with us. And I was sitting at the back of the waka, keep making sure we were on track. It was night time, the waves were crashing. He comes up to me, sits, and he sat with me. It's like you sitting like this. And he goes to me, "Matua, are we going to die?" And I said, "Not if I've got anything to do with it." But, it's that whole thing, because you get to a certain point and then you start to think, you start to believe the stuff that everyone else told you. And so, when you're getting on the waka, it should be like a portal into this change of your thinking to say, actually, I don't need to listen to all these people who said we drifted here, or you need these special electronics to get somewhere, because we can just do it. And I guess that's a part of why I've been into doing this for so long, is because, when I was at school, all the stories of my ancestors that I believed were true, because my nanas and my aunties and my uncles and my koros told me these stories and that they were true. I always believed it. They'll go to school, I'm a little 6, 7-year-old kid, and I'm being told that these are just sort of myths and legends. And so I started to get that point of thinking as a little kid, going, I'm going to get on a waka one day, I'm going to go sailing, and I'm going to be able to sail somewhere, get off the waka, and go, my ancestors did this. We could do that. And that, and people ask that, sometimes they'll say, do you believe that story? I go, I'm here. I've been there, I've come back, and I've used the stuff from out of those stories. And so what I'm saying is that we change myth and legend to reality.
Kia ora.
And that's when we start to change the way we look at everything.
Talking about reality, do you want to briefly comment on what we know and what we've learnt, perhaps, in responding to COVID, to the global pandemic?
From our point of view, to just really try and quickly give everyone an idea of what happened to us, we actually had this big voyage that we'd planned to sail down to Waipounamu, the South Island, because we had all these programs we were going to run with rangatahi. We were going to sail to Picton, to Nelson, to Christchurch, and we were going to run all these programs with schools down there, talk to them about navigation and all of that kind of stuff. And then we got hit with a huge lockdown. And the first lockdown lasted for, I can't even remember how many months it was. But we were at our marae. And my cousins who look after the marae said to me, "Cuz, you should just stay here with your crew." So we stayed at the marae, 18 of us, for like 4 or 5 months. And in that time, we learned that we can all live together in a community space like that. We can deal with something like the pandemic that was, lots of other people were losing the plot. And here we were living at the marae, looking after it, painting the roof, doing all the gardens, mowing the lawns, growing food, and watching the ocean in front of our marae recover. Watching the water clear, watching fish come back into the harbour, all those kinds of things, as well as our own, I guess, recovery, taught us that actually we can get through this. We can do this quite well. And we can do this together as our own little group. And as time's gone by, our little whānau, because our town's only got about 400 people in it, but our little group living for so long at the marae was something that really lit a flame of, we can get through this within the rest of the town. Even though everyone was sort of stuck in their houses and things like that, we were, as a crew, always making sure that we weren't supposed to go fishing, but we'd go and catch some fish and stuff like that, and then go and take it to all our nannies and things like that, and make sure if we grew, our garden was going good, take food to all the people in the community, and it worked. And so what's happened is that whenever a lockdown's called, we're always going, cool, it's good, we're okay, we don't need to stress out like everybody else is. And I think that's a great thing we learned from that.
Chris, you do a lot of work in supporting Native American tribes, and I wonder whether there is a particular approach taken in exploring commercial opportunities as an example, and whether or not you draw on the experience of traditional knowledge of the elders in that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that approach, you can rely on cultural values to move forward. For example, I work with a small tribe in northern, well, it's 6,000 people. I guess it's not that small, but a community in Northern California, the Yurok tribe, where they are not only protecting their natural resources around fishing, and they also do a lot of beautiful carving of these redwood canoes. And I was with the tribal chairman, and it was actually his grandfather's canoe that was hand carved. And he was telling me the values and the cultures of the importance of this canoe as we go down the river, and a lot of the work that the Yurok does with their industries and programs go into dam removal and cultural preservation. And I think using those values to do economic development and economic prosperity allows them and all tribes in the United States to really define prosperity in their own terms, and having that culture and values as the backrock of everything a lot of our tribes do is very important.
Hayden, can I ask you a similar question? Because you are in the business of building and growing your tribe assets, your tribal assets. And what sort of approach do you take in terms of drawing on mātauranga Māori?
Well, I guess recently in the last probably 4 years, we was actually a failed fishing trip. I was out on the beach and someone just happened to be walking past. We didn't go fishing, and they started talking to me about this amazing plant called hemp. And they spoke of all the benefits that the hemp has, and basically it aligned with all our atua, with papatua, nuku, rangi, nui. And so we've been investigating that over the last 4 years. We've been growing it and looking at producing products and stuff. So I guess getting into industries that can have a number of benefits, not just all about pūtea, but bringing our cultural values and tikanga right alongside, because as I said before, we feel that for many years it's been left out in the cold, and we need to start acting quite quickly.
Hinemoa, I'm going to ask you to, or give you the last word. As you can see, we're running quickly out of time.
Yeah.
If using mātauranga Māori or traditional knowledge is so valuable, is so very, very important, what does that look like in a global sense, and the value or not that is actually being given to traditional knowledge?
Kia ora. One of the things that I think is really important, particularly at festivals like this, is that we scrutinise our global entities, global structures, and examine to what extent they actually have Indigenous people working there in paid roles, and then utilise and implement the knowledge in robust, authentic ways that those Indigenous workforces and teams bring forward, and the demands of our Indigenous communities and how those are met by those global entities. And I think what we can see clearly, as we've heard a little bit from the UN, and we know that actually our Indigenous colleagues there are not in paid roles. And certainly from a WHO perspective, I know that the World Health Organization has no ongoing salaried Indigenous department. So I think those are just a couple of litmus tests, if you will, that perhaps will spur us on and will encourage entities such as those to do better.
A great place to leave it. Hayden, Hape, Dr. Hinemoa, Elder, Hoturoa, Barclay-Kerr, and Chris James, thank you very much. Ho mai te paki, please thank our panel.